Hi, I'm Liz Whiteacre. Let's think about how we can respond effectively to action plans during peer review this week. We'll think about taking a bigger picture or providing macro level feedback since this is a much longer essay. We'll also make sure that we do a careful close read so we can provide that micro level feedback as well within the framework of the CEW method. So not only can it be great for helping us draft our papers, but it's a wonderful tool to use in revision as well. We'll also scout out formatting errors, in-text citation, works cited inconsistencies, as well as think about style when we're providing feedback as we read our peers' papers. You don't want to take the time to move all your stuff into a new apartment only to realize next week you have to move. It wasn't the right place, right? So that's a bit of a stretch, but when we're thinking about micro level and macro level feedback, we're really thinking about the bigger picture. Where are we at in the big scheme of things before we dive in and we look at one small little tiny apartment within that big city of Indianapolis, right? So the same thing here when we're looking at our papers, we don't want to scrutinize one paragraph when perhaps when we take a look at the bigger message being communicated, that paragraph doesn't fit in and may need to be removed. When you're thinking about big picture strategies or macro level revision and you sit down to read someone else's action plan essay, it's a great idea to sit down and read the essay all the way through to give yourself some bearings and think about what is the altruistic action that the author is planning on taking. Is that made clear to you at the beginning of the discussion? Perhaps in the first one or two or three paragraphs, you understand what the discussion is going to be about and leading up to. Is it clear what steps the author needs to implement in order to be able to make this thing work? So you might need to think about it from a step-by-step perspective, and do those steps make sense to you as a reader? Is there anything missing, or do you get confused how this connects to this? Is it clear why the steps are going to help the author be successful? Is there a bit of a discussion? I'm going to do this, 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 and this. Well, are you made aware of why those are good things to do, or what the author feels might happen if those steps are taken? And then finally, is it clear why initiating this plan is going to allow the author to help a targeted group of people? So do the steps of action lead up to essentially that altruism, that helping somebody else out, whether or not it helps us, the actors. So reading through and getting a sense of what is being discussed in this paper is a great way to get started in your peer review. And as you're reading, if you have questions come up, use that comment feature and track changes to record those questions as you go. It might be that the question is resolved or answered later in the paper, but maybe you wouldn't have to kind of carry that confusion with you so long if the author knows that if they address that a little bit earlier in the paper, people are going to be like, cool, let's move forward with this discussion. The CEW method that we've been exploring as we've talked about developing our notes in our annotations and the annotated bibliography. So we've talked about developing paragraphs and also the big, wider essay structure. That idea of claim, evidence, and warrant. So I pulled in this should look familiar if you checked out previous video, that idea of the claim and the warrant sandwiching the evidence. In this bigger paper, as you're reading through, if it feels like quote, 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 whoa, right? That's a lot of information and I'm not sure what to do with it, then this CEW method is going to be really helpful to you, because if you can identify the feedback, you can even highlight it orange and say, all this stuff seems to be coming from this source. And as a reader, I'm not sure why you're telling me this, so a claim needs to be introduced in front of it. And I don't know why these things are relevant to what you're trying to do. So we need that warrant or that discussion that happens afterwards. So if you're reading something, you're like, I don't know, you can come back to the CEW method and try to figure out, well, what's missing, right? What's missing from this? It might be that the person is just talking, 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 and it could be that evidence is missing. Or there's claim and evidence and there's no warrant. Or they just dive right in with a quote and you see evidence, but you're not sure what idea that's supporting. So oftentimes if you're feeling a moment of, if you come back to CEW, it'll help you figure out what is missing for you as a reader, and then you can communicate that to the author so they have an idea of how they can fix it and solve that moment of confusion for you and other readers as well. Some things that you can think about as you're reading the paper through. Has the author presented a clear framework of claims? So you've already read it through once, now you're going through again. Are you seeing topic sentences being used to introduce paragraphs? Right? That can be something that will signal how structured the discussion is. If evidence is what's leading all of the ideas forward, they said this and they said this and they said this and they said this, you're getting a sense of what's being talked about or what could happen, but we don't really know what the author thinks about that, or how that's connected to the author's personal intentions in taking this plan of action. So the evidence should really be there to support and illustrate the how do I want to do this, and the I want to do this needs to be front and center. So the claim should be supported by that personal experience, information from sources. There may be some pictures, infographics, charts, other types of data, maybe even some embedded video or audio that might help support that idea. And then has the author warranted that, right? As you're reading through, if you see all of the paragraphs end on a citation, right? So the last thing you see is an end quote or that end parenthesis. Ask yourself why, right? Why was I just told this? And that can be a great way to help the author think about why they're providing this information. How is it connecting back to the bigger thing? Why is doing this something that's going to be helpful? And that goes to the significance of the supporting claim. You might consider the conclusion as kind of the big warrant of them all, where it says, well, I've told you all of this because, and that can be the moment where the author explains to you and other readers the significance of choosing to take this action. Why is it going to be so beneficial, not only maybe to the people that the author is trying to help, but also to the author themselves. Here's an example of something that you can do to help you out while you're reading somebody else's paper. If you're not quite sure whether or not the CEW method is being used. So here, if you look, I've underlined what I feel is the main claim. Right? This is coming from a student's paper that I had permission to share with you. So this is a real live action plan that was written last year. So the student says, something that I might want to look at is taking some classes now while I have time that might benefit me later on in life. So that is the claim. That is one little step in the greater plan for this particular student. And then we have some discussion there. I'm a business major. I plan on going to law school following my time here at UND. I think that certain courses that my major requires will be able to further my degree process and help me learn skills to be able to change the world. These classes may include nonprofit management, economics, supply chain and management, business 101, right? So here we have kind of a presentation of what the person can do. And then we have a moment where the author says, I've seen many examples online of young students that have worked with musically related nonprofits, and even though they've not started their own organizations, they're still extremely helpful to those around them. That's that warrant. Right? The reason why that warrant is there is it's helping us connect these classes that the author feels could be beneficial to the goal, right? And the goal in this particular paper, which you'll see as you continue reading, is that the author would like to work with kids and engage them in music in after school programs, either by participating in another organization whenever they can find one that they can work with, or by developing one once they've graduated and they've started their career. They'd like to see that happen in their community, and trying to set the foundation or the groundwork to be able to get involved in the community and have that happen. We switch to acclaim. Something else that I need to consider is finding role models that I can use for inspiration. And now we have shifted to a piece of evidence. These artists and organizations bring the transformative power of music to a world in need of education and healing. And now we shift to a discussion. These people are the perfect example, and so on. So we're going back and forth between, hey, I'm thinking about this, I'm seeing this, and this is how these things connect. And so you might take out a highlighter if you want and highlight, well, here are all the quotes and summary, and is there text surrounding that? Maybe, maybe not. But it can be a helpful tool when you're revising your own work, and also when you're looking at somebody else's, to try to figure out what the organizational pattern of a particular paragraph is. And if all of the paragraphs have this type of structure where we're presenting, I want to do this, here's an illustration or reasons why from my personal experience and my evidence from my sources, this is why I think this is a good idea to do. All of those things connected then will lead to a really clear plan of action by the end of the paper. Close reading is important too. Right? So you've kind of done a big picture read through, and then you want to go through and read the essay one more time, a little bit more carefully. The second time you go through, you're looking at the sentences, and you might be identifying typos. You might be investigating, why is that red, blue, green squiggly? Why didn't the author check those out? Well, maybe they weren't sure how to respond to the particular notation from Word. You can also think about style. Are there any sentences that are hard for you to follow or feel incomplete? Are there any sentences that feel repetitive? Maybe you're looking and you see the same formatting where it's subject, verb, phrase, and then citation, and then it's repeated maybe 3 times in a row. You might have an opportunity there to use some of the skills that we talked about in an earlier video lecture, where you're using sentence variety, right, to mix things up a little bit and make the experience a little bit more engaging. You'll also want to look at integration of source material. Every time does the author say, in this article they said, right? Does that give you enough information to understand where information is coming from, or how much the authors trust their sources? They have a bunch of notes where they say it comes from here, this is what I think about it. Are there moments where you would prefer to have a little bit of information? Maybe an interview, you'd like to know who this person is. Who's Smith? Maybe a sentence that introduces that person and their level of expertise would be really helpful before we get into a conversation with that person. Also looking for in-text citation, and if it's there, if it's not there, if you think it should be there, is it accurate? Looking at the works cited page, don't ignore that. Right? That's a really important part of the document. Are all of the sources on the works cited page cited in the paper? You could use that great Command F and use the find feature in Word to do a little bit of checking for your author and see, right, I'm going to choose 5 out of the 10. Are they all there? And let them know if you can't find them or they're not matching up. And then the keyword, are they matching up between the works cited page and the in-text citation? Let's look at an example for scouting for inconsistencies. So this is a paragraph that I've pulled. As I'm going through and just kind of starting to take it in, I see a source being introduced in the second sentence. So here I have, students often find it challenging to manage their time during a research project. In the Higher Ed magazine article, how many sources do I have to find? The author suggests one obstacle is that students underestimate how much time finding sources can take, period. How? So right now, that looks a little different to me. I've been given both titles in the sentence. Okay, so that might be something to pay attention to. It can be frustrating when a student spends an hour tracking down sources and only one of them is helpful. The authors from Central College say students can be more successful if they chunk their time. I think this is a great suggestion, and tools like Google Calendar, which all notifications to be sent, can help students organize those chunks. Building extra time into the plan can also be helpful, and if students don't end up needing it, they can treat themselves to much deserved time off. I would agree with that. I hope you get your papers done super fast this week and you have some much needed time off. So these were three things that stood out to me as inconsistencies, specifically in MLA citation. I might also go through here and do a little identifying. It was a bit hard to read the sentence where it starts with, "This is a great suggestion." So I might also mark that with track changes for my partner as well. But the reason why I'm looking at those three things specifically is I'm noticing that the keyword how is not matching up with the two titles listed. And I know that the period isn't in the right spot because how, that the parenthetical citation, should be part of the sentence. And when we put the period before it, it looks like it's the start of the next sentence. And then in that other sentence, it has the authors, but there's only one person listed in the citation. So I would want to double check that with the works cited page. And I noticed that after Central College say quote, but I'm not seeing where that quote ends. So this might be an example of how I would suggest people would maybe fix it when they're doing a revision. So right here, I noticed that my how should be matching up with this title, not higher ed. So it's not a title that is italicized. And then I might want to give a little bit more information than how. When I checked the works cited page, there were two different sources that started with the word how. So I need to go a couple more words. So here I went with how many sources, and that made it really clear which one of the two I was focusing on here. I've also taken my quotation marks from this title so that they match up. And because I shortened it, I put the ellipse or dot, dot, dot to let you and readers know that this is a part of the title, not the whole thing. Right. I'm also thinking that, okay, because we use the, because we use the whole title here, we don't have to include that at the end as well. So I might make the correction and then also say, you don't have to put that in there. Over here, when I look at the works cited page, I've got Jones, and there were 4 authors. And since there are 4, I can use at all. I don't have to list all of them there, only 2, 1 or 2. And then here I have the end quote, right? After students, I'm assuming it comes end quote after times because that's where the author put the source citation formula. And those would be the notes that I would want to provide to my partner. Right. Sorry, that printer was going crazy. So looking ahead, what we're doing this week is spending time on each other's peer reviews and giving people time and attention. And they're going to be doing that for you too. Open up both papers, give them a good read just to get a sense of what the conversation's about. Use your comment feature to ask any questions or maybe make some suggestions. Hey, did you know that this is happening on campus? You might become a resource for your partner as well. The next thing you'd want to do is do a review of looking at it a little bit more closely, trying to catch inconsistencies, any errors in citation, making any suggestions for improvement. Maybe adding a little bit in about a source would enhance the particular paragraph that the person is presenting, or maybe working on a little sentence variety would be helpful too. We are in the home stretch. When you turn this paper in next week with blog 3, we're there. We're going to have our holiday break, and then we will be having our final exam after that. I hope that you enjoy reading your partner's work this week, and I can't wait to be able to read the next version of your paper too. Take care.